What was banned when Israelites lent to each other because of poverty? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Leviticus on walking through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Leviticus 25. We're going to be reading from verses 29 to 38. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Leviticus 25, beginning at verse 29. If a man sells a house in a walled city, then he may redeem it within a whole year after it is sold. Within a full year he may redeem it. But if it is not redeemed within the space of a full year, then the house in the walled city shall belong permanently to him who bought it throughout his generations. It shall not be released in the Jubilee. However, the houses of villages which have no wall around them shall be counted as the fields of the country. They may be redeemed, and they shall be released in the Jubilee. Nevertheless, the cities of the Levites, and the houses in the cities of their possessions, the Levites may redeem at any time. And if a man purchases a house from the Levites, then the house that was sold in the city of his possession shall be released in the Jubilee. For the houses in the cities of the Levites are their possession among the children of Israel. But the field of the common land of their cities may not be sold, for it is their perpetual possession. If one of your brethren becomes poor and falls into poverty among you, then you shall help him like a stranger or sojourner, that he may live with you. Take no usury or interest from him, but fear your God, that your brother may live with you. You shall not lend him your money for usury, nor lend him your food at a profit. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, to give you the land of Canaan, and to be your God. In this chapter, we've been looking at two observances for Israel: the sabbatical year, which occurred every 7 years, and the Jubilee year, which occurred every 50 years. During both the sabbatical year and the Jubilee year, the land was to lie dormant, with no sowing or reaping done. Israel was to depend on God for their food that year, which he provided in abundance during the last harvest year before these special years. Another feature of the Jubilee year was that any land that was sold was to be returned to its original owner or family. The reason? Because the land is the Lord's and he gave it to them, so they had no right to sell it permanently. The land could be redeemed before the Jubilee year for the proper redemption price, but at the Jubilee year, it must be returned. There were a couple of exceptions to this law, however. If you lived in a walled city and had a house there and then sold it, you only had 1 year to redeem your house, or it would be permanently become the property of the one you sold it to. Here God seems to make a distinction between property used exclusively for dwellings and that used to provide for one's necessities. Without the Jubilee, if someone was poor and sold a piece of land that could produce crops, they would impoverish their family forever, making it hard for them to obtain food. However, if you lived in a walled city, you could find other places to live, either in that city or another, and would thus not be impoverished. You thus had only 1 year to redeem your house in the walled city if you wanted to, and the Jubilee could not be used to receive it back. The houses of villages found in unwalled cities were to be counted as fields of the country, as they usually would be an accessory of the land that was owned, and thus may be redeemed and released in the Jubilee year. The exception to this rule, however, concerns the Levites. Unlike the rest of Israel, the Levites would receive no land on which to grow things. They would be given cities and suburbs of those cities in which to pasture flocks. If a Levite became poor and had to sell his house, they could redeem it at any time and would be able to receive it back. This was due to the fact that they had no land, and since they worked in service to the Lord, could receive no land, and thus the Lord would provide for them. The land that they did have in the suburbs could not be sold, however, as this was given to the Levites exclusively. Coming now to verse 35, we find out how Israel was to treat the poor among their brethren. From Leviticus 19:18, we read that Israel was to love their neighbor as themselves. This meant if their neighbor fell into poverty, they were to help them. However, they were not to use a person's poverty as a means of making profit. They were not to exact usury, which means interest on a loan, but fear God and respect his wishes. They were to make no profit whatsoever off the poor, thus taking advantage of a person's misfortune. They were to lend at cost and receive payment back at cost. We're going to find, the Lord willing, in future studies that Israel broke this commandment and God was displeased with them for it. Today we have people who prey on the poor, exacting extreme amounts of interest on money that they lend to those who are poor. And even though society may allow it, From a pure godly standpoint, loving one's neighbor doesn't mean making a profit off of them because they were poor. We should help them where we can and not seek to take advantage of them. Note, however, this restriction on usury applied to lending to the poor, not to lending to a person who wished to invest that money. Such would be proper and not breaking this commandment. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Leviticus 25, verses 39 to 46, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.